why Chandrayaan2 couldn't land safely, and what are the reasons for the issues that we faced, and how we are going to overcome that trouble in possible that situation developing in Chandrayaan3, and what we have done. I think this is very important than the mission itself. So you remember that in the Chandrayaan2 happened almost 4 years back. Today we are at almost 4 years later, plus minus 10-15 days. We are discussing Chandrayaan2. Chandrayaan2 was launched on 22nd July, almost the same time, lift out time, and it traveled all the way to moon. Almost correctly, it went into a 100-kilometer orbit. It did all the maneuvers, and only in the last part of the landing process we had the problem. It had the orbiter. The orbiter is still functioning on the moon with all instruments, and it is still giving a lot of scientific data. Of course, many people won't even speak about what it is doing, orbiter is doing. Orbiter, all the scientific objectives of that has been still met, and a lot of scientists are making use of the data. Lander and rover, there were few instruments, but that couldn't be functioning because it ended up with a very high velocity. So I'll just quickly explain what went wrong with Chandrayaan2 and what corrective actions that we are doing in Chandrayaan3 to mitigate all those problems. Let me tell you that a little bit technical now. If you have no interest in flight dynamics, you can ignore. And all those planning of travel of bodies across space is something very, very complex. But it requires a lot of thought process and discussions and coming out with certain methods by which it can be designed. The problem in bringing down any object from space to ground is the ability to remove the energy which is contained in it. The energy possessed by bodies at tremendous velocities are very high. The kinetic energy is very, very high. And it can be taken away only by some force that you apply in opposite direction to take away all the energy. Either you can use aerodynamics. If when you are traveling through air, you can use the drag as a retarding mechanism. In moon, there is no atmosphere, and you have to use only the engines to kill the velocity. And this velocity has to be killed in two ways. Any orbital object is having tangential velocity with respect to the body about which it is orbiting. But ultimately, it has to land vertically. So there will be a vertical velocity because gravity pulls it down all the time. And the moment you reduce the horizontal velocity, it will fall like a stone. And if you want to stop it, then you need to give an opposite direction velocity. So the whole process of killing the velocity is a continuous process in which both vertical and horizontal velocities are to be killed in a controlled manner so as to reach at the point that it has zero horizontal velocity and zero vertical velocity, or reasonable low value of vertical velocity, absolutely no horizontal velocity as well. So this is a trick and how to do it. It's a very complex mathematical problem in which requires fuel optimality issues, the capability, the power plant capability, the dynamics of the body, all this plays a lot of roles. So that design process I am not explaining here, but I want to tell you that there is a process in which we start the whole process at 100 kilometers. So 100 kilometer orbit, the velocity will be reduced in such a manner that it will have an orbit of 100 kilometer apogee and 30 kilometer perigee. And from that point, it starts the descending process. It's called the powered descent phase. And it is split into various phases, and this whole phase is designed with its guidance schemes, its color algorithms, instrument calibration, the feedbacks. Different instruments come at different times. When it actually travels here, you can't see the ground properly. So you can put a camera and then see how high I am from the surface, because all this calculation of where it is in this kilometer is simply coming out of the verification orbit from ground. Using radar, we track its trajectory and say it is at 30 kilometer. What's the guarantee it is at 30 kilometer? It can be erroneous due to our tracking errors. So this is called relative navigation. You don't have any information of the local effects. You don't have any information of the terrain here. There could be a hill of few kilometers. There could be a valley of something else. So really the height could be different. So we have to use absolute sensors to find out what height it is really. Either use a radar altimeter or optical system or laser altimeter or similar instruments to find out where exactly it is. So all this will come into play when it has reached a certain height where the sensors will actually start functioning. Until then, we depend on the inertial system which is inside. The inertial system is a laser-based gyroscope which actually measures its position in a manner which a typical inertial sensor measure. So the whole process of traveling from here to here is controlled manner. The body will be, initially it will be like this. The engines will be firing in a manner which will kill all the horizontal velocity. By the time it travels, it has to slowly turn and reach orientations in which the opposite velocity will be killing both the horizontal and vertical velocity. The moment you kill the horizontal velocity, the vertical velocity will start increasing, and you need to start killing it also. So this trajectory has to be so designed. Then there is a phase where we will do certain instrument calibration, keeping the attitude same. It looks at the ground and calibrate all its measuring instruments. So actually very good data comes or not. Then decides to go for the final landing. And at some point it will also hover and see that it is able to stay stationary and do the measurements to confirm how high it is from the ground. Then make the final descent with a certain fixed velocity. So this was algorithm, but there was something going wrong in Chandrayaan-2. I will quickly explain that part. Possibly some of you may follow, some of you may not follow. It took many days for us to understand, because unfortunately this whole event happened in Moon and we were not able to collect back the debris. So maybe when we are finally going one day with somebody will go from India and then bring it back. It is still there, so nobody will take it away. But then today we have only the physical reconstruction process of the sensor data and also the hypothesis that we put forward, which actually matches with the observable data. From that we can synthesize that this has gone wrong in this, and that could be the most probable reason of what happened. That's how any event can be reconstructed. So from the reconstruction we understand certain things, but all of that we understand will not be explained to you for today, because I am still in a mission, Chandrayaan-3, and I don't want a backlash. Okay, so the whole of this process, the rough braking process, was really fantastic. Everything was going wrong. No, everything was going right. So everything was going wrong from this point. So I am marking a green and the red where it actually started. There is a deviation started from this point. The point where the deviation started is a point where we keep the attitude constant. The body position was kept constant, and it was doing a certain process called camera coasting. So it was taking the images of the surface and trying to correlate with and sending it as correlate with the images inside or references inside. Then after this process created certain anomalies which couldn't be recovered in the further process. So finally, when the algorithm in this couldn't foresee the possibility of that things developing, and the intelligence available was not enough, or something went wrong in that. Some software errors happened, so algorithmic errors happened. We put unnecessary constraint which couldn't come out of it. So finally it ended up with a crash, and we will see here that the whole of the last of the information that we received was at a height of around 335 meters, and the whole thing happened almost 800 meters away from the actual landing site. Less than that we crashed. So that's what happened. Now I will explain a little more of the detail. The whole of the orbit was perfect, and it started, the camera coasting started, then only the problem started. The first of the problem that happened was the thrust of these 4 engines was slightly higher. And it was slightly higher, but it was still within the bound of the engine, supposed to be the thrust. But then, when this thrust is higher, there is a correction process of the total acceleration we should do. The algorithm for correcting that was erroneous. So it's called the cumulative thrust was computed at the end. It was supposed to be corrected, because there is a phase that you have seen where attitude is kept constant. We don't want any undue control activity taking place because orientation may change. So it was somehow the importance was given to keep the orientation constant and not to correct all these errors, which was very costly decision algorithmically. So we found that there is an algorithmic error in which the correction process should have been instantaneous. Then this problem would not happen. Then in the fine landing phase, large errors accumulated at the end of the coasting phase, which caused the system not capable of correcting. It started correcting, but then there was an artificial limit inside. The rate at which it can correct was limited by the artificial limit which we put as 10 degrees per second. We were allowing the craft only to turn at that rate. If it was allowed to turn at a faster rate, possibly it would have corrected. But then the designers assumed that there will be no demand of this nature and unnecessarily system should not rotate it at faster rate. They kept an artificial limit, which is unwanted. So that created the ability to correct and come back to the required orientation. The time was not enough. And when that was not enough, what it was doing, then it found that it is not at the landing site. It is still far away. So the algorithm is trying to say, I want to go there. So algorithm is telling the craft, what it was doing is trying to gain horizontal velocity and move there, whereas it is already having high velocity, vertical velocity. It's not able to kill that velocity. So it created a confusing condition for the entire algorithm. What it has to do? It is always telling you to go and land at that point. Unable to go there, unable to kill this velocity, and the time the computer computed, the total time to go to do the landing. There is an algorithm on board to compute what is the time left, and based on which the whole process will be designed. That time was happened to be lesser than what it should have been. A few more seconds more, if the compute algorithm gives you, it would have landed still safer. So I said in a very simple language, I don't know whether you understood all of these issues, but then for the time being, I will only limit that much for the sake of it. So the essence of this problem was a wrong implementation of an algorithm on board. And second, the artificially limiting the parameters unnecessarily without foresight of failure. So the whole design was done based on a success-oriented means, not a failure-oriented approach. The moment you do that, there are possibilities like that. This is the first lesson that came out of this. Now you can see when on the moon, this is supposed to land here. This should have been the landing point, but it landed here, almost 800 meters. Okay, 482 kilometers. Yeah. And are you able to see the lander here? Sure, you are not able to see now, no? Now can you see? So it is still there. So this is an image from the high resolution camera that is on board the Chandrayaan2, which took this image. So hopefully we will be able to take images later as well. So the lander, it actually crashed at a location which is very near to a crater, but still a safer location if it was a good landing. But this was a landing point which was only half a kilometer by half a kilometer size. Now we have done certain modifications to handle these problems I mentioned, and how we are overcoming it, I will explain to you